Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to What is Fabrizio Inking. I'm Fabrizio, your host, and I'll be inking. So today I am inking Horace Hoover. This is Horace Hoover, a character from a comic book that I'm currently creating. Speaking of which, you can purchase issues 1 and 2 at alternacomics.com. Horace Hoover, it's like an occult investigator set in the 1920s, 30s, mystery, adventure kind of stuff. A little bit of a throwback to old school newsprint and coloring, etc., etc. Check it out. Issues 3 are coming out. Issue 3 is coming out in January, 4 and 5 the rest of this year. So let's get started. Let's see who's in the chat. Spicer McLeroy, hey, how's it going? Thanks for joining. It is a wintry Tuesday evening here in Pittsburgh, that's for sure. Yeah, the new year's not going bad so far. I'm not big on like big declarative plans because they usually don't work out. So I'm keeping my bar pretty low. One of those bars is eating 3 Reese's peanut butter eggs. That's how low my bar is. And this has got to come in. Yeah, so I got quite a bit of this done. Outlined a fair amount of it. Got a little bit of the background done. The sky is going to be tricky. I'm still not sure if I'm going to be doing line work or just solid black or something like that. So I'm going to leave that until the end. And then if I ruin it, I will cut the feed short. But anyway, lots to do in the meantime. Well, this is some news. So I'm going to be doing Three Rivers Comic Con. If anybody is in the Pittsburgh area, it's June 2nd and 3rd, I believe. So I will have a vendor table at the Three Rivers Comic Con, which I'm pretty excited about. I tried to do last year, but I couldn't get in time. And I think that they actually took my application for last year and essentially applied it to this year, so which is why I got in. So that's pretty cool. Because by June 2nd and 3rd, we should have issue 3 printed and ready. So I'll have issues 1, 2, and 3 to sell at the convention, which will be pretty cool. I gotta find a nondescript area to start with. Which means the background. You know, I will say that out of all the things that I've learned, one of the most important things about inking for me is even if you get the value wrong, you know, even if your lines aren't perfect, as long as you stay with the form, it's probably going to look pretty good. It won't be perfect, but it won't be quite as egregious as if you didn't. So make sure you're following the actual form. So if it's a hill, then and have your lines wrap around that hill like a topographical map or something like that. If it's shadow sort of coming off of a fist, kind of like how I have right here, I took essentially the direction of the light, and then I used that as the direction of the lines. Now this is the background, so you don't want to get too fiddly with it. Make sure to sell at least 800 issues while you're there. Low bar and all. Yeah, I know. 800 issues. That would be something. No doubt. After I went to Baltimore, I definitely have specific expectations because I don't want to say I know my crowd, but I feel like I do. The people that came and stopped at my table were just a little different than sort of your average comic book convention goer. I don't know what it was about those people that they saw Horace H. Hoover and like, oh, I need to stop there. I don't know if it's because they were open to trying something new. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. There definitely seems to be some sort of commonality between all the people that stopped. We'll see if Pittsburgh breaks that. Although I don't think I can wear my Raiders hat at the Pittsburgh Comic-Con. Pittsburgh is very, very supportive of their team. So if I want to sell 800 copies, I don't think I can wear my hat. So I have a lot of grass to do, basically, which is okay. I always think of Bernie Wrightson when I'm doing something this detailed. And I don't know how he did it. I really don't. It's easy to do the fun stuff of a drawing. So if you're doing a Conan book, it's fun drawing Conan. There's never going to be a scenario where that's not fun, drawing him or Red Sonja or some monster. But for Bernie Wrightson, you have a huge page, and out of that page, Dr. Frankenstein is 1/10 of the entire page, and the rest is books and beakers and vials and tubes and things like that. Definitely is a special skill. I mean, heck, people won't even sit through a movie now, let alone sit and do that sort of very I don't know what the word is. So I don't want to make this all black because that's going to be, it's just your eye's going to be stuck, basically. It'll kind of go up the cape, and then it'll kind of stop at that black. So I'm going to try to really navigate this as best I can. It's going to be almost black. I'm going to put very little space between the hatching. And some of it might be black, but the whole thing can't be black because it would just completely flatten the form. And I would rather start out not going solid black. And if it turns out that you need to go solid black to balance the page, then that's totally fine. But I'm always loath to do that at the beginning, because I don't really like using whiteout. Kelly McCone. Hey, how's it going? Bernie Wrightson was my first thought watching you make those lines. Looking good, man. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for popping in. Yeah, Bernie Wrightson, there's certain comic book artists that I feel like they're sort of artists and illustrators first, and then that just happen to do comics. There's like a long line of those guys, like Neil Adams, I put in that category. And then there's sort of comic book artists that learned by just watching other comic book artists. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but this is my guess. I don't know, but I feel like McFarlane would be in that category. So he doesn't have like an illustration background. He has a comics background. Or Buscema is actually a great example of that too. He did advertising, so he really did a lot of just regular illustration before he did comic books. So I feel like the artists that had that sort of from illustration to comic books just have a totally different look and feel, and it's the stuff that I usually gravitate towards. But it's also not like overly rendered and overly realistic. There's a couple of artists that I'm not a fan of just because they're too realistic. They're really well done illustrations, and they're accurate, and I can't really find fault with any of the anatomy or the lighting or anything like that, but they're kind of dead to me. So I guess it all depends. I also heard from the model maker today. He's been working on the Horace Hoover model for most of last year, or at least the last half of last year. So it sounds like those will be finished and sent out from the UK probably in the next week or so. So we'll be able to have those out, which is pretty fun. I finished that Hawkman. Actually, you know what? I'll grab that. 1 second. So I was working on this for a couple of weeks, but I finished it last stream. I was at first I was going to do black in the background, I kind of went back and forth, and I ended up just doing sort of like a textured acrylic paint. So this turned out pretty good. It's a totally different style than I'm actually used to, but yeah. Spicer McLeroy, nice. Have fun with that new print. Always love seeing my sculpts in print. It's never astonishing that tech and art have come so far together. Yeah, you're the other ZBrush artist, long time ZBrush artist. And it's funny because I've been doing ZBrush for so long. I was trying to think when I started it, but I remember when I was working in ZBrush, 3D printing was not readily available for consumers. It was still sort of like a company thing, but you couldn't. They didn't have any services, and you definitely couldn't buy a 3D printer. back then. But I used to just stare at my ZBrush sculpts and be like, I need to get that out of the computer. How do I get that out of the computer? So as soon as 3D printing became available, I was on it. I remember the first 3D print I got. I don't know when this was. It was as soon as Shapeways started. It might be 10 years ago, I don't know. So as soon as they started to offer like a consumer-facing service, I got my first sculpt, and it was maybe 5.5, 6 inches. And it was $400 for the sculpt, and it was such a low quality. I couldn't do anything with it. I couldn't even paint it. The layer lines were so bad, and that kind of depressed me for a bit. And it was quite a few years before I could really see my stuff in like a high definition version of it. But ever since then, I'm kind of obsessed with it, as we should be, right? Digital's cool, but seeing it sitting on your desk, that's everything. I started 3 months before 3 came out. That's close to me. I honestly can't remember the version, but it was so long ago that it's just something I've been using forever. As long as I can remember. It's also something that I will never sort of give up, regardless if they get bought out by Maxon or whoever. There's just no chance of me switching. So I think I need to go black right here. It's just getting a little too gray. For sculpting, I'll never switch from ZBrush, but for production, post-production, Blender is where it's at. Yeah, so I have a very long history switching applications too. I started with Cinema 4D many years ago, and then I switched to Modo for quite a while, doing game modeling, animation, things like that. And then Modo kind of lagged behind for me. I switched back to Cinema 4D. But now I think you're right. I think kind of Blender is where it's at. You can't beat the price. I think they got the product up to where it needs to be. And that's kind of what I've been working on for the past few years, on and off. I don't do as much of that stuff as I used to, though. I mostly just sculpt. I don't do a lot of game modeling or animation or anything like that. Yeah, the idea of an open source software that does what Blender does, it's pretty incredible. the screen. Oh, geez. Sorry about that. I was like zoomed way out. I've been learning how to do comic book shading on 3D character. Pretty much every studio has the Blender guy now. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely fun to mix 2D and 3D like that. This is a long time ago, but I used to essentially box model something. This was for a game, so I would box model a pack of cigarettes or a gun or something like that, and I would essentially UV unwrap it, print that out in blue line on watercolor paper. I would watercolor the UVs, then I would scan that, bring that back into Blender or Unity or whatever, and then put it back on. So I would have a watercolored gun or can or something like that. It looked really cool, but wow, was that a process. And it wasn't really sustainable for any, big project. It was just experimentation, but it looked really cool. Anytime you can sort of combine two approaches like that. How long did your Hawkman take to ink? And do you have any favorite contemporary artists that you follow no matter what the project is? Wow. As far as Hawkman, it's all on video. I think it was 5 hours, give or take. Now when I'm on stream, I'm a little slower, but we'll say 4 to 5 hours for the Hawkman. As far as contemporary artists, yeah, I mean, there's a bunch that I like. And they've been around, but they're still doing lots of work. So like Jay Lee was a huge influence whenever he did the Dark Tower stuff. That was a big deal for me, to see him go from his sort of 90s look to that really, really beautifully illustrated version. I actually love Sanford Green, who did Bitter Root. I love his work on that. It's also traditional with a brush. It just looks really great work. I bought a page of it, actually. That's how much I liked it. Obviously the sort of the superstars out there like Jorge Jimenez, Richard Friend. He's been doing penciling now. He was an inker for a very long time, but I've been loving all of his artwork recently. He's a great teacher as well. If you're into art at all and you want to learn, I highly recommend checking out Richard Friend's Patreon. It is well worth whatever the cost is. Tons of great videos, really invaluable stuff. Who else contemporary? Yeah, I know I always sort of revert to my old standards from back in the day. But there's definitely good artists out there that I follow. There is, I would have to pull up my Instagram to get their names. There's one dude that he's French, and he does a Western comic, The Grave Digger, I think it is. Incredible work. I think it's called The Grave Digger. I have to announce colors on these pencils. Yeah, it was really unique when that came out and blew me away. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, Rich is a great guy, and man, his seriously, I recommend his Patreon to anybody that is interested in drawing, because it's really some of the best instructional videos that I've ever found. Admittedly, I am a little picky. I mean, like, as most, everybody's picky to some degree, right? Sorry, sometimes I just have to really concentrate and I can't talk. And ink. Like, we all have certain styles that we like, and it doesn't mean that those other artists aren't any good. It just doesn't, there's just something about that other artwork that doesn't kind of speak to us. So there's a lot of good stuff out there that it's not my style, that I really gravitate towards. I know people love Alex Ross, and I have never been able to really get past the photo real stuff. They just look like really great illustrations, but they kind of don't have the life of like a Eric Powell stuff. I love that artwork. Really great lines, great washes later on. Yeah, I love all the Goon artwork. I always appreciate photorealism, but why do it in the medium of comics? So many opportunities to do something new. Yeah, it's just, again, I'm not, I mean, it's great art, but sometimes I don't feel it. It doesn't feel like a comic book to me. I don't know how else to describe it. I think things have to kind of stretch and pull and bend in ways that aren't photoreal to kind of convey the energy of comic books. He's not, I don't think he's doing comic books anymore, but another artist that really influenced me is Kent Williams, I should say. He didn't do a lot of comic books. He did Havoc and Wolverine, he did The Fountain graphic novel, but man, his stuff is incredible. I know he does oil painting, so I think that's primarily what he does now, but his rendition of Wolverine, really great stuff. His fine art stuff is great too. I actually own a drawing that he did of essentially just a crow. It's a beautiful, like, ink, it's an ink wash of a crow. So I don't think, I definitely didn't go too dark, which is good. Again, that was my concern going into it, that this would have just been like a black hole basically for your eyeball. So I can go a little darker just to make sure that this isn't the only dark area. You just gotta kind of spread around that value a little bit. But speaking of, like, Kent Williams doing fine art, I'm gonna be oil painting this year. I got some studio space, and I haven't done it in a long time, but I've been really wanting to recently. So, you know, as I'm finishing up issues 4 and 5, I'm going to kind of ramp up some oil painting, which is kind of exciting. We'll see how long it takes to kind of, I don't want to say master, that's a terrible verb, but like get my feet like wet. Hold on 1 second. My phone was blowing up. I wasn't sure what it was. I had to check to make sure that it's not an evacuation notice. All right, let's jump around a little bit. I've done a lot of work in this center area on the left-hand side. It's so bad. I usually wait until the very end to do like right under his helmet. Is that on the screen? But I definitely feel like this will give me a good idea, again, of the balance of like dark darks. So I want to get that in there now, because again, it's a fairly big shape since we see underneath it. Usually you don't really see underneath his helmet like that. It's usually just the shadow that's being cast, so I don't have to worry about a huge black shape. that's for a background like this. It's not. I don't really need to worry about super tight, like architectural rendering, especially for a sort of a creepy old Victorian type house. But you do need to make sure that the perspective's right and the bones are there. That way, whenever you get to the inking stage, if you're a little, I don't want to call it messy, but loose, we'll use the nicer term loose, you still can see where the foundation is. And if you need to sort of bring it back, you can, because it's there and you can see it, as opposed to kind of flying by the seat of your pants and you only realize you're way off perspective when you sort of step back. It's kind of how I always approach architectural stuff. It can get pretty tedious, worrying about that kind of stuff, but in the long run, it works. Now again, this is sort of a creepy house, so I actually want this to be a little wonky, like off kilter. Is that off? Nope. There we go. This is where I get to judge penciler Fabrizio very harshly, because I'm inker Fabrizio now, so I'm like, oh man, penciler Fabrizio sucks. What is he doing? Why did he do that? That doesn't even make any sense. My favorite is penciler Fabrizio is lazy as hell, which inker Fabrizio is not entirely wrong on that sometimes. You just get to a certain point in a drawing where you really want to finish it. And either you've been looking at it too long, or you've sort of messed it up and have had to work it and rework it so many times. It's just pure frustration and aggravation looking at it. And that definitely happens. Although I usually just walk away. I was working on a few pages for Horace Hoover number 4, and it's a pretty important scene. It's an emotionally resonant scene, we'll say. So it was difficult because you really need to hit it in a certain way. You can't just phone that in. So I labored over that for a few days. I kept on redoing thumbnails over and over and over, and I sat down at the drawing table and I did the whole page, and then I erased it and did it again, which I don't do very often. But since issue 4 is like the denouement, we'll say, of the story, then it needs to land exactly how I'm picturing it. Hopefully it does. So I'm very aware of that in every panel of every scene. Metatron Scoop, how's it going? He'll fix it in the inks. Penciler Fabrizio. Exactly. And that schmuck colorist Fabrizio, man, he definitely gets the raw end of that deal. It would be interesting to see my pencils inked by somebody else one of these days. If anybody would be interested. I definitely would post something if somebody wanted. I mean, I've tried a few different styles myself, so it would be fun to see somebody else's take. As long as they don't yell at me for my sloppy pencils. Although I do pretty tight pencils compared to some people for sure. Post file. Okay, yeah. I'll figure out a good page to post. Or if you have something in mind from the first 2 issues, if you're interested. I mean, either way, I'll put it on my Horace H. Hoover website. Horace Hoover. I think they all go to the same place now, but it's horacehoover.com. Yeah, I'll make sure I post it there and point people to it if anybody's interested. The other thing, too, really is the colors. Because I do pretty old school, limited palette colors. It would be interesting to see like a modern take on it, too. I don't know if I always mention it, but I live between a church and a cemetery. And I love it. There's no better place that you want to be when you're writing a story than listening to some church bells going and peeking out the window and seeing a cemetery, or going for a walk. It is very conducive to writing stories. Certain kinds of stories, I should say. If you're writing kids' books, you probably don't want to be taking a stroll in the cemetery before writing a children's book. Or maybe you do, I don't know. I'm sure you could make something fun out of it. The names are fun, too. The names, locations, the dates. It's like as soon as you see a name and some, I don't know what they're called, like the little sayings that are on the actual gravestones. I don't know about everybody else, but I immediately picture somebody, and that's just a lot of fun. What are your major considerations with your comic coloring style? I like contrast. I mean, outside of the limited palette, the idea is that I stick with 70, 80 colors, whatever it is. I can never remember what the actual amount is. As long as I stay in that, I'm okay. But as far as the comic book, I take a lot of time to use color in like a story, as a story. I don't know how to describe it. It's integrated into the story. So, for example, in issue 1, spoilers, we see Horace. Everything's orange, right? It's like sunset. It's very pleasant. And then when he hears a scream, he goes upstairs. Everything in the apartment of that girl is purple. All of a sudden, we get blues and purples, and things are sort of definitely off kilter. As soon as Horace figures out that it's in the book, and then if he takes the book, the thing will follow him, it switches from purple to orange. And so I use it as a storytelling device along with just sort of color theory considerations. Yep, a lot of grass. A lot of grass. I was just gonna say my brush is feeling kind of gunky, so I looked up and it's 10 to 9, so I'll be closing up shop here in a minute. I think next stream I'm gonna have some juicy behind the scenes dirt on comic creators. No, I'm just kidding. But I bet I could get some people to pop in. Having two figures like this is actually kind of tough. You need to make sure that they're engaged, we'll say. So, you know, they're overlapping, they're touching, or they're about to touch. But you need to make sure that they're separate. You know, that one is clearly in front of the other. And if it's black and white, it's all the harder to do that. Well, I made a decent amount of progress, I think. I have always been obsessed with giant colors, from Doctor Strange to Dracula. The Vision. Yeah, something about the giant collar I've always dug. It's just not very subtle. I think I like that. Alright, I'm just going to kind of noodle here for another minute or two. In fact, I'm going to stop. Alrighty, let's see where we're at. Wow, I still can't get that in there, huh? Yeah, so making progress. There's still a lot of gray. And like I said, I'd like to build it up. I would rather have gray and then be able to go to black instead of just putting a bunch of black and then not really seeing, not having it work as expected. But yep, most of the outline's done. Got a lot of gray in there, some blacks, some big spots of blacks. And then I'll use that so I know, so I know the ratio of black in this center area. So I will try to put some just straight up blacks maybe behind his glove, just to make sure that there's enough solid black on Horace as well, and him, because we want them working together instead of having one guy be gray and the other guy be black and white. Because I don't want to rely on coloring to fix anything like that. It should work in black and white if at all possible. Sometimes you can use color to help you if you did mess up, but you don't want to rely on that if you don't have to. So anyway, thanks for popping in, everybody. I appreciate it. This is a fun little Tuesday snowstorm stream, and I will be back online. If anybody's interested in that Hawkman by any chance, I'm probably going to sell it. Maybe I'll post it on Twitter or something like that. Let me know. All right. Thanks again, everybody. Have a good night.